Your paycheck hits. For maybe 6 hours, it feels like money. Then rent posts, then the car payment, then the insurance premium. By Thursday, you're doing the math again. Same math, different month. Most people assume they're bad with money. That's usually not what's happening. What's happening is that the fixed costs eating your income have grown faster than income itself. Housing alone in most U.S. metros now runs 35 to 50% of take-home pay. That's not a personal failure. That's a structural shift that happened over about 15 years. The average American household earns roughly $75,000 a year before taxes. After federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare withholding, that number drops significantly, often to $56,000 or $58,000 depending on the state. That's your real starting point, not the $75,000. The number after the government's cut. From there, rent or mortgage takes its share first. Always first. A 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-size U.S. city, not New York, not San Francisco, now often runs $1,400 to $1,900 a month. That's $16,800 to $22,800 gone annually on housing alone. And that number has climbed roughly 30% over the last 4 years. In many markets, people locked into leases from 22 felt fine. Then renewal came. A $200 rent increase sounds manageable until you realize that's $2,400 a year you have to find somewhere. Most people don't find it. They just quietly absorb it somewhere else. Savings, groceries, the credit card buffer, transportation is the second big line item that people consistently underestimate. A car payment, insurance, gas, registration, and occasional repairs can easily run $700 to $1,000 a month. Some people look at their $380 car payment and think that's their car cost. It isn't. Add full coverage insurance, often $150 to $250 depending on age and location. And the number shifts fast. Gas at $3.50 a gallon. Commuting 5 days a week adds another $150 to $200 monthly in many cases. Then a tire, then an inspection. Then a repair that the mechanic quotes at $600, and you don't have $600, so it goes on the card. Transportation quietly becomes the second largest household expense for most working Americans. Not the first thing people plan for, but often the second thing that breaks the budget. Food costs have also moved in a way that doesn't show up cleanly in the headlines. Grocery bills for a family of 3 or 4 in 2024 often ran $900 to $1,200 a month. Not fancy groceries, not organic everything, just regular groceries with the occasional name brand and a few convenience items. People remember when a full cart cost $180. Now the same cart is $240, and the quantity is smaller. That gap isn't imagination. It's documented. Food at home prices rose roughly 25% between 2020 and 2024, and food away from home, takeout, delivery, sit-down restaurants, rose even faster. A delivery order that used to cost $28 now comes in at $44 after fees, service charges, and the tip that feels obligatory. People kept ordering. The apps kept charging. The monthly total kept climbing. Utilities are the quiet category: electricity, gas, water, internet, phone. In many states, electric bills have risen 20 to 30% over 3 years, partly driven by infrastructure costs and energy demand. A household paying $110 for electricity in 2021 might be paying $145 now without using more power. Internet is usually $60 to $90. Phone plans for a family are often $120 to $180. Combined, utilities and connectivity can easily run $400 to $600 a month before you've thought about them. Healthcare is where the math gets genuinely uncomfortable. Even with employer-sponsored insurance, the average worker now contributes roughly $1,400 a year just for their own premium. Family coverage? The employee contribution averages over $6,000 a year in many plans. That's money leaving your paycheck before it ever arrives. It doesn't feel like spending. But it is. Then there's the deductible. A $1,500 or $2,000 deductible means the first $1,500 of actual medical costs is yours anyway. So you're paying premiums plus out-of-pocket costs until the deductible clears. 2 layers of cost before insurance meaningfully kicks in. A lot of people avoid care because of this. Not because they don't need it, because the math doesn't work that month. Childcare is its own category that often shocks people who haven't priced it recently. Full-time daycare in a mid-cost U.S. city commonly runs $1,200 to $2,000 a month per child. Some families pay more for childcare than for rent. That sentence sounds wrong. It isn't. For a household earning $65,000 take-home, with 2 kids in daycare, the childcare bill alone can consume 40% of net income. This is why a lot of 2-income households don't actually get ahead the way the math suggests they should. The second income often goes almost entirely to childcare, taxes on that income, and the added transportation and food costs of both people working. It pencils out sometimes. Sometimes it almost doesn't. Student loan payments have returned for millions of borrowers after a long pause. The average monthly payment for borrowers who graduated in the last decade is roughly $300 to $500, depending on balance and plan. That's a car payment-sized expense added back into budgets that had already adjusted to not having it. Some people genuinely forgot to plan for it. 3 years is a long time. Others planned for it but found that everything else had gotten more expensive in the meantime. The money they'd freed up during the pause had already been absorbed by higher rent, higher groceries, higher insurance. So the return of that payment didn't just add a line item. It created an actual shortfall in a lot of cases. There's a common assumption that if you're struggling, it must be the lattes and the streaming subscriptions. Cut the coffee. Cancel Netflix. That's usually the advice. And look, subscriptions do add up. A lot of people have 6 or 7 running and couldn't name all of them right now. Streaming, cloud storage, fitness app, news site, that software trial that converted to paid 14 months ago. But the total, even if you cancel everything, is usually $80 to $150 a month. That's real money. It's not nothing. But it doesn't explain a $1,200 monthly shortfall. The discretionary spending conversation is not wrong. It's just dramatically oversized relative to the actual problem. Blaming a $6 coffee for a broken budget is like blaming a leaky faucet for a flooded basement. The structural costs, housing, transportation, healthcare, childcare, food, those are what moved. Those are the categories that compounded quietly over several years while wages in many industries moved slowly or not at all. Median wage growth since 2019 has been real in some sectors. In others, it's been essentially flat when adjusted for inflation. A worker earning $22 an hour in 2019 and $25 an hour now has not kept pace with what that income actually buys. The paycheck number went up. The purchasing power didn't always follow. That's the part that feels disorienting. It looks like progress on paper and doesn't feel like it in the grocery store. There's also a geography problem that rarely gets discussed honestly in personal finance content. The cost of living varies so dramatically across the U.S. that national averages are nearly meaningless for individuals. Someone in rural Ohio and someone in Austin, Texas, earning the same salary are living in functionally different economies. The Austin resident might spend $2,100 on rent. The Ohio resident might spend $850. Same job title, same salary, entirely different financial pressure. And yet most financial advice, most benchmarks, most savings rate targets are built on averages that don't reflect either of their realities. The 50-30-20 rule, 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% savings, doesn't survive contact with a $1,800 rent bill on a $48,000 salary. It's a fine framework in theory. In practice, for a lot of people, needs alone consume 65 or 70% of take-home pay. Savings doesn't come from a rule in that situation. It comes from scraping, timing, and compressing other categories. And sometimes it doesn't come at all that month. Not because the person failed, because the numbers didn't allow it. That's worth sitting with for a second. Not every budget gap is a discipline problem. Some of it is simply what happens when fixed costs grow faster than income for long enough. The average American household carries roughly $6,000 to $8,000 in credit card debt. A portion of that is lifestyle spending, sure, but a meaningful portion is gap filling. Rent was due, the paycheck hadn't posted yet, the card covered it. The car repair was $700, and there wasn't $700 liquid, so the card covered it. The deductible hit in February. Nothing had been saved specifically for that. The card covered it. Credit card debt in America is partly a consumption story, but it's also partly an income-to-cost ratio story. When the gap between what things cost and what people earn becomes persistent, the card stops being optional. Average APR on credit cards in the U.S. is now above 20% in many cases. So the person who put $700 on the card for a repair and makes minimum payments ends up paying closer to $900 or $1,000 for that repair over time. The cost of the repair didn't end when the mechanic was paid, it kept running. This is how cost of living interacts with debt. The original expense expands, And the expansion is invisible on the day it happens. Not what you plan to spend, what you actually spent. The bank statement, not the intention. Most people who do this exercise for the first time are surprised, not by one category, but by the total. Everything looked reasonable individually. Added together, it left almost nothing. That's not unusual. That's actually common. And knowing that is more useful than feeling like an outlier. From there, the practical question isn't, how do I cut more? It's which costs have any flexibility at all. Some don't. Rent is rent until the lease ends. The loan payment is fixed. The insurance premium is what it is. But some costs have more flex than they appear to. Phone plans, insurance rate shopping, subscription timing, grocery strategy, utility usage patterns. None of those alone changes the picture dramatically. Combined and maintained consistently, they can recover $200 to $400 a month in some households. That's not wealth. But it's breathing room, and breathing room changes what's possible over time. The bigger levers, income growth, housing cost reduction, debt payoff, take longer and often require larger decisions. But they're the ones that actually restructure the math rather than just manage it month to month. The paycheck isn't broken. The relationship between what it covers and what things cost, that's what shifted. Recognizing that clearly is the first step toward making decisions that actually fit the real numbers, not the numbers you wish were true. So the question worth asking isn't whether you're spending too much on coffee. It's whether your fixed costs, the ones that pull before you even see the money, are sustainable on what you actually earn.